Hey guys, I'm back. This is Jacqueline Novogratz, and I am here to do my third of a number of readings until May 26th, except on weekends, to do excerpts from my new book, Manifesto for a Moral Revolution, which is a book I wrote essentially as a love letter to anyone who wants to make change in our fragile and flawed but beautiful world. Manifesto for a Moral Revolution is something I wrote because it's so clear to all of us that our current systems aren't working. They've run their course, yet we've not reimagined what should take their place. And so those who will make the change have to build a new set of skills, a new set of operating principles, if you will. And so this book, Manifesto for a Moral Revolution, is essentially the 13 operating practices, the principles that thousands of change agents have taught me, as well as I've learned the hard way myself in building institutions that create real change. One of those principles, the first, is called Redefine Success. And in many ways, it's the heart of a moral framework. Because for too long, we've been defining success by money, power, and fame, rather than by the amount of energy we release in the world, the good we create, the beauty we build, the way that we sustain the earth. And it's only when we decide for ourselves that we will be driven by a different metric that we have a chance to build systems that reflect that decision. So, as usual, I'm going to read an excerpt from the chapter and then take questions. So please put any questions that you have in chat and we'll go from there. Chapter 2, Redefine Success. On the morning of India's winter solstice in December 2015, Ankit Agarwal could not have imagined that a bunch of floating flowers would change his life's trajectory. Ankit was showing Jacob, a friend visiting from the Czech Republic, the sights of his hometown Kanpur, an industrial city known for its textile and leather tanning factories, built on the banks of the great Ganges, one of Hindustan's greatest and most sacred rivers. The two young men sat on the steps leading down to the Ganges, musing on the meaning of life. As the two conversed, thousands of the faithful and tradition-bound entered the waters to mark the shortest day of the year with blessings and ablutions and flowers. It was a scene Ankit had witnessed throughout his life, a colorful but blurry backdrop to his days. Despite recent successes in his early career, Ankit was full of angst. He was pondering aloud what it would take to find contentment and success when Jacob interrupted him, pointing to the river as if he'd not heard a word from his friend. Little did Jacob know that his distraction would be the key to Ankit's destiny. Why is India's most sacred river so polluted with an endless float of dead flowers? Jacob asked. Ankit had always taken for granted the sight of marigolds, roses, jasmine, and other blossoms floating down the Ganges. Daily, millions of people across India brought flowers and foodstuffs to Hindu temples as blessings for the gods. Unwilling to desecrate these blessings by disposing of them in the trash, priests dumped them in the sacred rivers. Rotting flowers and foodstuffs in the water was just the way things were. But look at the scum of chemicals floating in the waters on the water's surface, Jacob rejoined, surveying the clothed men and women wading in the river. And imagine what those pesticides and chemicals emanating from the flowers are doing to those believers as they wade in carcinogenic water. At first, Ankit shrugged off his friend's observation. He knew the Ganges was highly polluted. He had even visited some of the factories along the riverbanks. But the sight of those riotous, rotting flowers got under his skin. How, he wondered, could a tradition considered so essential and so gentle have such ugly ramifications? And how bad could it be? That moment awakened Ankit's curiosity and offered him a thread to follow, one that drove his sense of possibility and unleashed his powers of innovation. The deeper he dove into the question of solving the flower issue, the more he began to open himself to a more profound meaning of success. And for him, the timing was right. 4.5 years earlier, Ankit had reported to his first job after university as a newly minted engineer. Waiting in the company's reception area, he had noticed a wall filled with portraits of every employee who'd won patents. I want this. I want my picture there, he told himself. Success, or at least happiness, began to look like a portrait with a metal plate inscribed with his name. So, Ankit drove himself relentlessly, staying late to complete tasks, often sleeping in the office. Just 3 years later, he became one of the youngest engineers in the company's history with a plaque on that wall. The whole team applauded. Then a strange thing happened. Instead of jumping with happiness, it was as if suddenly everything seemed meaningless, Ankit explained to me in an email. I started to ask what I wanted to do in life and began to feel the whole rush was meaningless. There had to be more to life than prizes, awards, titles, or salaries. At age 25, Ankit understood that his success would come only from focusing on a, quote, challenge that would improve lives or the earth, really anything that would bring about real change. Those flowers floating in the river transformed into blessings for Ankit. Here was a chance to solve a problem that mattered. Changing the ancient practice of dumping flowers into the rivers would require confronting a status quo solidified over many generations. Ankit knew he would go from being viewed as successful to being considered crazy by some. But he had attempted the conventional route to success and found it less than fulfilling. Now he had a chance to redefine success for himself. Crazy might be just the ticket. In researching the temple flower problem, Ankit discovered that Indians discarded more than 8 million tons of flowers yearly into rivers such as the Ganges. The flowers are covered in a variety of pesticides, including arsenic, lead, and cadmium, all of which contribute to waterborne diseases. The more complex the problem revealed itself to be, the less Ankit connected success to himself, and instead focused on changing the entire system. He partnered with his best friend, Karan Rastogi, to create Phool, a company that would solve multiple problems at once. Phool in Hindi means flower. Success to the company meant the improved health of the Ganges, measured by the number of tons of flowers the company was able to retrieve from the temples. Success would also be measured by the number of jobs the company created, and particularly by the quality of jobs for disadvantaged people. To realize these elements of success required a for-profit model, according to the two entrepreneurs, one that ensured financial sustainability and attracted enough capital to meet the scale of the problem they were trying to solve. Profits were an important indicator, but the true measure of their venture success would be in its impact on all stakeholders, including employees and the earth. And of course, customers. To this end, Ankit and Karen needed a saleable product. They reasoned that a growing group of consumers was interested in products built on principles of the circular economy, systems that removed waste from the production cycle by finding ways to reuse and repurpose it. Ankit and Karen asked themselves what they could produce from the flower waste that people would want to buy, and how that product would improve people's lives. They spent 18 months listening to potential customers and trying to understand what they might value. One ingenious product they settled on was incense sticks. Used for cultural and religious practice, incense is burned daily in many Indian households. However, the majority of sticks are made from charcoal, which negatively affects respiratory health. Ankit and Karen reasoned that they could use what was already being treated as waste to make flower incense sticks that were healthier and of lower cost. The flower incense sticks would require minimal skills to produce and would embody the spirit of the temples from which the flowers came. Phool now collects about 10,000 pounds of flowers every day from Kanpur's temples. The company provides each temple with large bins which are routinely picked up and taken to a plant, essentially a warehouse and drying area. To eliminate the flower waste's toxicity, the company sprays it with an organic bioculum. Scores of women then separate the petals to transform dried organic waste into incense sticks and warming compost. As part of their commitment to sustainable business practices, Phool's founders dedicated themselves to hiring women from the manual scavenger caste, one of the most marginalized groups on earth. Though the caste system is technically outlawed in India, more than 750,000 scavengers are still consigned to removing untreated human waste using flimsy tools such as cardboard, tin plates, and buckets from toilets and pit latrines, which they then must sometimes carry several kilometers before reaching a disposal site. These scavengers suffer extreme prejudice, often living at the margins and carrying a heavy yoke of poverty. Especially in the company's early years, the Phool's founders' commitment to hiring women from this caste added complexity and cost to their business. The scavenger community was located at the edges of town, so the company sought to hire a bus to transport the women to and from work. But it took 2 months to convince a bus company to drive them. Then, when the owner of Phool's first rented space got wise to the employees' caste, he destroyed the factory's equipment and summarily threw the company out. Though Phool sustained devastating financial losses, Ankit and Karen started over, persisting through clenched teeth. Ankit's dream of success had evolved from the days when only traditional honors mattered to him, and the founders weren't going to be cowed by other people's narrow-mindedness. As the level of difficulty rose, so did their commitment to realizing their dream. In January 2018, Acumen's India director, Mahesh Yagnaraman, and I visited Ankit, an Acumen fellow at his factory. Wearing a black leather jacket and jeans, he greeted us in the open-air courtyard of his factory, where rows of women sat on tiny plastic stools, concentrating as they sifted through tangerine, bright yellow, and white flowers. Inside the warehouse, other women stood in long lines, rolling incense sticks with speed and precision. I tried my hand at rolling the sticks and gained instant respect for the women who worked at Phool. Meanwhile, the women couldn't stop laughing at the mess I made. Our little acting group sat for a while in a small room that abutted the courtyard with Ankit and his wife, Ritima, discussing Phool's business fundamentals. Ankit spoke with both toughness and tenderness, making it clear that Phool's mission to clean the rivers and provide dignified jobs drove every decision the company made. Only then did they make the numbers work, understanding that it may take a long time to build a profitable business that stays true to all its goals. The company is committed to its employees first. In addition to providing daily transport, Phool pays well, provides health insurance, and serves the women tea twice daily. It also encourages the women to take a bottle of clean water home to their families at the end of each day. I asked Ankit why he sent the water home to them. Society reminds these women every moment of their lives that they are outcasts, they are unwanted. But when you can drink the same water as other people do, finally you can feel equal, he responded. We soon moved to the courtyard outside the warehouse, where a vibrant, multicolored carpet of flowers had been laid out for drying. A group of women by the flowers had taken a break for lunch. I requested to join them and asked how their lives had changed since working at the company. I love coming here, said a freckled woman with smiling eyes, her hair pulled back. Before this company, I had to move from house to house for work and never feel respected. Life was very difficult. Here we learn new skills. We're with friends. Another jumped in. This is the first time anyone has tried to teach us something. Sometimes I worry that I'm not learning fast enough, but these people believe I can do it. And that gives me confidence. I'm bolder now at home and in my community. I'm able to keep up with school fees for the first time, too. Another woman added, I bought my family our first television, and now the neighbors come over to my house to watch. A fourth chimed in, stating, they respect us in this place. We don't have to sit on the ground. I told her I didn't understand. This seat, she said, pointing to the $2 plastic stool beneath her, is the first one anyone has ever offered to me. As our discussion continued, the women avoided any talk of caste, understandably distancing themselves from the all too recent humiliations and heartbreaks engendered from belonging to a group deemed untouchable. They euphemistically referred to their past jobs, cleaning up waste, as domestic work, and quickly steered the conversation to their present states of happiness. I was touched by the women's gratitude for the opportunity of decent work that entailed neither degradation nor abuse. A woman in a caramel sweater over a yellow kurta, quiet till then, added her voice to the conversation. It is so good here, she said. We feel fresh being around flowers. I like the smell. And it is good that our work brings blessings back to the gods. She was referring to the virtuous cycle of these flowers, collected from temples and converted into incense sticks before being returned to the temples as a second round of offerings. The women did not mention that many households that purchased the sticks would nonetheless refuse to allow the women who produced them to enter their homes. Is there anything you would change at the company? I asked. The woman with smiling eyes responded, I only want this place to succeed, she said. We must work hard here to help it grow. That's all. I only worry that one day it might move from here. By then, Ankit had walked up, himself a paradox of presentation and values. His somber mien belied the tenderness with which he spoke to the women. We're not going anywhere, he assured the women gently. To some, Ankit and Karen's choice of whom to hire and how to manage these employees seemed noble, but ultimately misguided. It is challenging to make any company profitable, and they could have taken a much easier path to building a business. But Ankit and Karen define success in terms that include more than money. Imagine the women gossiping and laughing as they travel in the bus driven specifically for them. Consider what it might feel like to have tea served to you when you've been considered less worthy than other people your entire life, or the joy that comes from earning money to experience a level of self-reliance you've never had before. Picture their children, who now receive fresh drinking water each night, some of them for the very first time. Laughter, respect, the security of productive work, a sense of belonging, dignity. These are things that matter the most to our experience as human beings. Yet our financial and economic too often fail to acknowledge them when calculating success. Although it may take time to change ancient practices, Phool is using modern market incentives grounded in moral values. This combination of fundamentals bodes well not only for the company's long-term financial sustainability, but for a sense of shared success. The temple priests feel proud that they are no longer polluting rivers in the name of the gods. The men who collect the flowers have good, decent jobs. The rivers are cleaner, making the pilgrims who bathe in the Ganges and other rivers less likely to fall sick. And consumers know that by purchasing these high-quality goods, which have been produced sustainably, they are providing jobs and dignity to some of the most disadvantaged women in India. That is the kind of success everyone can feel good about partaking in. Success doesn't just wait for us on a distant horizon. Success is within all of us, waiting for us to live into it. It exists in the beauty we create, the goodwill we offer, the ideas we spread, the causes for which we stand, and the lives we transform. It goes up in the health and well-being of our children, our communities. We love the world and one another. Even if this particular venture fails, Ankit, already a very successful man, allowing curiosity and a desire to serve others to guide his life's choices. Of course, the notion of redefining success rubs against the status quo. Humans are status-seeking beings. We yearn to be accepted, respected, loved. Our current systems, economic, political, and social, reinforce a definition of winning based on money, power, and fame, rather than being rewarded for what we take. We're too often affirmed by what we make. What if our golden rule were not only do unto others as you would have them do unto you, but also give more to the world than we take from it? That would change everything. If enough of us pursued that path, the world of inequality, exploitation, and injustice would slowly be replaced by a world of inclusion, fairness, and dignity. The point is this: we are the system. We decide how to define success, and we can reject purely individualistic terms. There is much to learn from cultural approaches that value sustainability over economic progress, or that build in practices community more equal. Shiroy Lily Shiza, an Acumen fellow from Nagaland, Northeast India, shared with me how her ancestors practiced the Feast of Merit. When a community member earned significant wealth, he would be required to host enormous feasts for the community, she said. That person would consider it the highest honor. He would be entitled to wear a special cloak and ornament his house to signify his high social standing. And the villagers revered that person as the pinnacle of success, especially those wealthy people who by the end of their lives had given everything away. Each generation has the opportunity to renew the values, the systems, and structures that define their societies, and to jettison those that no longer serve. The most systems are those grounded in fundamental on human flourishing. We can disagree on the specifics of humans need to succeed, but if our starting is an environmentally sustainable world that enables all of its inhabitants to flourish, then we've got a foundation for a moral frame. Unequal systems persist. They can be reimagined and reformed when people muster enough awareness and collective determination to do something about them. And it goes on. So redefine success. So I'm going to answer some questions that I think you have for me now. Can you describe a time when someone you trust challenged your definition of success? It's a great question. People ask me that all the time. Easy for you to say. What I would say to them is, look, I'm not saying that this definition of success is easy. When I'm a young person, and particularly in my 30s, interestingly, when I was very young and grew up without a lot of, I certainly had a family that kept me well fed and healthy. I still question myself all the time. And it was really in my 30s that it felt the most difficult, because so many of my friends were choosing, and understandably, more conventional approaches. And so I would think, well, here I was, I didn't have the house. I didn't have the salary. I didn't have the husband. I didn't have kids. I had a job I couldn't explain to anybody, and a whole dreams. And sometimes I would wake up and I would really worry about at the end of the month and really feel foolish. It wasn't helped when well-intended uncles would say, you've got this MBA. Why are you wasting it? But something inside me knew that the role models that drove me were the most sparkly people in the world, and that somehow the only way I could find myself to the me that I wanted to be, even though I didn't feel like the me who was that just yet, was to stay the path. And so I would say we all have a balance to make, and the most important is to drive towards something that is about whether we're giving more to the world than we make, not to live provisionally, not to wait till we have given ourselves away to reach these pinnacles of others' definition of who we are, but in a way that stays true to that core. Some people feel fully alive as they're working within the financial system, and we need them. And I would say to those people, keep that same metric. Are you giving away more? Are you doing it in a way that promotes dignity? If all of us shifted and found that place where we have the greatest of being used, that's when it all changes. Did my definition change over time? No, but my definition was stressed and challenged, frankly, more from me internally than from which group of leaders do you think redefining success at a massive scale the way Ankit was able to do? I had a funny experience when I got an award for being a leading business leader, and it was all these really incredible, fancy, powerful, successful business leaders. But there were two, and I give Forbes magazine great kudos for this. Two nonprofit leaders, and one was Dr. Muhammad Yunus. And I think about how he reached conventional banking 50 years ago, almost. Certainly more than almost 50 years ago, 45 years ago. At a time when he was coming from one of the poorest countries in the world, and he by modern definitions, by all definitions, was an economist, incredibly well educated, and he decided to go into the village, understand how poor people made decisions. And he had an insight that when he gave $30 to 30 women, and they all pay back, that the very, very poor were paying in ways profoundly more effectively than the wealthy were repaying. So we started Grameen Bank. And unlike today, where early ideas can actually get liftoff because of social media, this was a time when no one paid attention. I got into microfinance 10 years after he started, and no one had heard of it. And yet he never gave up. And I think that when we look at some of those moral leaders, he ended up getting the Nobel Prize for Peace 35 years later. But he never veered from his path. To me, that's a definition of success.